Hey everybody, welcome to the Live Your Purpose podcast, where we want to encourage you every day to live on purpose. So excited to have a conversation with Rachel on today's episode. But before we go into that conversation, I want to just say thank you to all of you that make us part of your day, however you choose to do that, whether you're listening to this on your favorite podcast platform or if you're watching on YouTube. We appreciate you so much for tuning in today and whenever this may be. And we're excited that you're part of the show. We want you to be a subscriber if you're not already. So hit subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, as well as on YouTube, so you can be part of the community and help us to continue to get these episodes out to as many people as possible. We always have special guests on the show, Rachel, but I'm so thankful that you're here today and that we get to kind of unpack just a little bit of what it means to live out our own faith as part of our purpose, right? And Rachel is a wife to Destry. You are recently a mom, as of the time as we're recording this episode, to Simeon, who's an awesome little guy, and part of what we discussed on the previous episode of the show, the ever-growing just baby farm that is Meadows Church at this point. They're just sprouting up out of all places. And so I've known Rachel for a really long time, dating back to our time at Celebrate Church in Sioux Falls. It's funny, you think back, it feels like it was yesterday, but also like a different lifetime at the same point in time. So Rachel, I want to invite you to answer the question that I ask everybody at the start of these podcasts now, but do you feel like you're living your God-given purpose?
Yeah, I knew you were going to ask that question. I've kind of been
okay.
it.
Wow. That's a surprise to everyone here.
I would say yes, I am living my God-given purpose, and it's kind of been a journey to think about what that purpose is. I think we put a lot of stake in our purpose in like our career, and if I were to say that, I would say I don't know that I want to commit to this career being my God-given purpose that I'm in right now, but I would say where I'm at, what I'm doing, the people that I'm doing life with, and the people that I get to be in ministry with, yeah, I'm definitely living out my God-given purpose right now.
What's a way that you feel the confirmation of that for anybody that's listening, that's like, okay, I feel like I'm doing all the right steps. I feel like I'm doing all the right things, but am I actually doing what God wants me to be doing? What's a way that you know that it's from God?
Yeah, that's good. I would say just taking the steps, honestly, weekly, knowing that like I'm stepping into things that God has put on my heart, things that he has equipped me for, especially in places that I serve, like in youth and in the worship team. Like I know that when I'm in those positions, I feel like I'm living out my purpose. I know that I'm doing what God has called me to do, and confirmation of that is honestly like the lives and the interactions and the relationships that I get to have in those experiences. So
yeah, that's so important. It's impacting others through purpose, and we talk about that often on this show, how our purpose is not meant for just ourselves, right? It's meant to be an outpouring of who we are to others and to benefit others, and to not just benefit them, but to really, what you're doing can shape somebody's life. You never know when a conversation can do that, or when just letting somebody be that they need to cry on somebody's shoulder and you're just there. So you're a new mom. How's that been for you the last handful of months?
Yeah, it's been really great. Turned 4 months yesterday, which is crazy. It's the most fulfilling and exhausting thing I've ever done in my life, but I wouldn't trade it for the world.
What's the biggest life change that you've experienced so far? What's the good and maybe the not so pleasant?
Yeah, I'm a person who likes to be on time, and on time for me is early, and that is not something that I can claim necessarily anymore. I'm working on it, but having to take care of somebody else and make them get ready and try to be outside the door on time is not always an option with a baby. So just learning grace in that.
Yes. You don't just get to be patient. You get to, opportunities to be patient. Yeah. I love the teaching ways of God. But one of the things that I feel like the Holy Spirit put on my heart as, I reached out to you a couple weeks ago to be on the show is I feel like a lot of times, because you grew up in the church, I don't know your whole story. I know a little bit about, I worked with your dad back at Celebrate, and just an awesome guy. I used to love popping into Carmen's office and just having conversations every once in a while. And I think Bryce is off camera right now, but Bryce, you and I and others would oftentimes just kind of pop over there and just chat with those guys. And it was always fun. And but that's how I came to know you, was through obviously your dad and being at the church, and you stepping into youth ministry probably in 6th grade, 7th grade.
Yeah, I moved after 6th grade, so it would have been in 7th grade.
So you moved to Celebrate Church in Sioux Falls and you start serving there. I'm curious to know, the whole point of this podcast is we're going to unfold is, as a pastor's kid, there's a lot of expectations on you, a lot of extra eyes on you, people watching what you're doing, people listening to what you're saying, people, putting maybe extra on you that isn't necessarily fair from a younger age. Like, I just really want you to kind of dive into what that experience has been like growing up in the church.
Yeah. So I was born a pastor's kid. My dad was actually a youth pastor when I was first born. So honestly, literally just grew up going to church, like pretty much lived at church. And I honestly loved it. I loved being at church. I loved serving. I started serving in the nursery like as soon as they allowed me to, probably earlier than I should have been there. There was always adults in there. But it was like, I definitely found, I think a big part of my identity was being a pastor's kid. I knew that I was known as Carmen's daughter. I wasn't always necessarily known as Rachel, but it was like, oh, you're Carmen's kid, and so honestly, it did shape a lot of who I was. And my dad was a lead pastor when I grew up in Oregon, so he was a lead pastor at the church we were in Oregon. And then when we moved to South Dakota, he was a care pastor, I think was his first title. He held a couple titles. So honestly, that was kind of a shift, moving from like being the lead pastor's kid. And I grew up in like a small church, so I kind of knew everyone. And then Celebrate, was huge, thousands of people. And I still was known as Carmen's kid, but it was a little different than being like the lead pastor's kid. But definitely like a lot of expectations put on you by the congregation and maybe even on yourself. One of my favorite memes is like pastor's kid, like 90% of pastors sermon demonstrations.
Yeah. You're always getting talked about, yes, whether you want it or not.
Yes, every mistake you make, is this going to be talked about on now?
Can I share this weekend? Yeah. What just happened right now?
Yeah. No, it was good. My dad one time talked about something without like talking to us before Sunday, and we got paid for it. So,
nice.
Honestly, it was an okay deal.
You're like, don't ask permission ever again.
I'll take the cash. But honestly, yeah, just knowing that people not only have a microscope on your dad's life because they're the pastor and they're leading you, but your whole family's life, and knowing that people are watching, whether you're at church, whether you're at school, whether you're at like a friend's house, you kind of carry that extra pressure of being the pastor's kid.
How did you see that pressure affect your siblings?
Yeah, it definitely affected us all a little different. I'm like the typical eldest child, type A. So I don't know, I carry like a very strong conviction, I would say. So like when I do something wrong, I'm quick to like ask for forgiveness because I don't like that feeling. And my siblings they're all kind of like the typical middle and youngest kids. And I think it affected our journeys in different ways, especially like with how old we were when we moved, I would say. My brother is very like reserved. And one thing I know, like, it affected him, like being under the microscope. He did not like talking to people, and everybody wants to talk to you when you're a pastor's kid. So kind of had to learn like boundaries in that, and like where he could, have safe spaces to avoid people. And my sister the same way, just knowing that your life is under a microscope, and being so young when we moved, I think that really impacted just in general, because we moved because God called us. And we know, like, when people asked why we moved, it would be, well, our dad was called like to this church. And I think just saying that kind of puts people on edge, especially if they're like, what do you mean your dad, like God called your dad? If you're not a Christian, it's kind of hard to explain. Yeah. And like, that makes no sense. And you're like, I know it doesn't always make sense what God does. So I think her journey has been quite a bit different because she was so young and grew up maybe under a different microscope, but definitely like has impacted all of our faiths, and we're all like in really great spots right now. We've all come to kind of find our own faiths and grow into our own identities outside of being pastors' kids.
So when did that shift for you? Or maybe was it, if it was gradual or if it was like a big moment in that, like when did it shift from, okay, we're here because God called my dad, to being like, I'm sticking around because God called me?
Yeah. Honestly, I would say the shift probably didn't happen for me in Sioux Falls. I was in Sioux Falls until I went to undergrad in Indiana, at a Wesleyan school. Because we were pastors' kids, we got free tuition at a Wesleyan school. So there really wasn't an option. We were going to a Wesleyan school, whether we liked it or not. But that's when the shift really began to happen, I think, where it was more so about God's calling on my life versus my parents' life. Because I made the decision to go to college where I went. It wasn't, God didn't call my dad to go to Indiana. He called me. But honestly, I would say I don't know that I ever really thought like God called our family, God called me to Sioux Falls. And honestly, like looking back, I probably should have thought about that because I met my husband in Sioux Falls. So obviously, Destry, obviously like he had a plan for us in Sioux Falls, but I don't know that I ever really claimed he called our family to Sioux Falls. It was, I don't know. That's unpacking something new for me, I think.
Look at that. Yeah. We're reaching new territory, uncharted waters here on the show. Yeah, because I think that's really the core of what it is like, because I know for my kids, they'll have those same questions. Yeah. And for Simeon and all of the babies that I said like are sprouting at Meadows Church, they'll all have to answer that same question someday, is like, okay, when did this go from being God's call for my mom or my dad to being the thing that's part of my heart, Yeah. And so you said that happened kind of while you were at Indiana at school, and then you moved to Omaha. Like, what was that whole process like for you when you moved to Omaha to be part of, I guess I don't know if it was to be part of Meadows Church. Obviously school was involved in that as well. So Meadows just happened to be there, right? No, but talk about that whole shift in your life at that point.
Yeah. So I did 4 years in Indiana, and then I had to apply for grad school somewhere, because with my degree, you can't really do anything with just an undergrad degree in biochemistry unless you wanted to teach high school, and I did not want to teach high school. So I applied to really two schools. I applied to the University of Minnesota, and I applied to Creighton. And honestly, a big part of it was because of Meadows. So if you don't know, in high school, Destry and I, when Meadows kind of became a church satellite, I think is probably what it was called, satellite campus or whatever, we attended Meadows with like the youth ministry. So really knew like Monty and all of you guys. And I knew that if I came to Omaha, I would have a church home. And that's really important to me. Maybe playing it safe a little. I didn't want to have to look for a church home by myself. I would be the same way. Like I know that if I go to Creighton, I'm going to have a church home and I'm going to have people, even if I don't necessarily have, like our parents, I'm going to have people that I know. And we do have a little bit of family here, so that impacted it a bit. But honestly, the University of Minnesota never got back to me. Creighton accepted me. So that was pretty clear to me. God was slamming some doors and opening only one. So that's kind of how we ended up here.
A huge W for Creighton, I suppose, in that regard. Yeah. So that transition happened in your life. What's it been like for Destry in all this too? As like, I guess I knew him from serving at Meadows, the campus that we had in Sioux Falls. I know this is maybe kind of confusing for some of you that are listening, but yeah, we had a satellite campus in Sioux Falls that was called the Meadows campus. Then we planted Meadows Church in Omaha in 2017. What's that been like for him as well? Because obviously this is important to you, and has it always been the same for him? Like, how's that been for your guys' relationship?
Yeah. It's been crazy. So we started dating in high school and then did long distance for the first 3 years of college. He went to the University of Minnesota, Twin Cities. So that was tough. But when we decided to get married, he kind of just realized he had to go kind of wherever yes, we were both called, but he knew that he was going to go where I was accepted into grad school. And honestly, I can say marriage is probably like the most revealing thing to me about like we all have different upbringings. Like I recognize that I have a different upbringing than you, but being married to someone, and especially now like trying to parent and realizing like, oh, like you don't have the same history. You don't think the same way I do about how to raise people. And I think like me being brought up as a pastor's kid and knowing like wherever God calls me, I kind of have not a nonchalant attitude, but kind of like it's going to work out because God's going to like do it. And I would say Destry doesn't necessarily always have that. He's a little more like anxious and like, well, not that he doesn't trust God. That's not what I'm saying, but just the different ways that we were brought up definitely has impacted that. But I would say like over the past couple of years, and now that I'm done with school, we're kind of like know that God has planted us here for a reason, and we don't plan on going anywhere for a while. So
why would you say that is?
Yeah. I mean, Destry has a job, not that the job is the only thing holding us here, but I ended up getting a job here immediately. And originally, honestly, I was hoping to finish school and then move to Montana to be with my parents because I grew up in the mountains. I wanted to be in the mountains. Like that was my dream. But since coming here and just really becoming a part of Meadows, a part of the family, honestly, like my family is Meadows. Yes, we have like our relation families, but I don't ever feel like I'm alone here. I don't ever feel like I don't have family. I don't ever like have to think about, oh, who am I gonna like text to pray over this situation? I know that I have people here that are praying with me and for me. And honestly, like I can't imagine trying to leave Meadows. Like we're here for our jobs, but really like we're here for Meadows because we know that's where we're called and it's where our roots are at right now. So
what would you say as far as this kind of idea of like, okay, I feel as a former, or not as a former pastor's kid, but that's more of your upbringing at this point, that really kind of shapes a different aspect of your faith walk now, whereas like before maybe it was obligation and now it's more of obedience. How would you articulate that in your own experience?
Yeah. Honestly, like referencing an earlier podcast that you and your wife Bethany did, just talking about how you raised your kids to like love the church. Like that's really my story. Is I was raised to love the church. Yes, like I had to be there out of obligation, but I really like began to want to be there, to want to serve, to want to be a part of it. And now it's just like I can't imagine doing anything else, honestly. And it's because like that's where I find my purpose. That's where I know like I'm impacting the lives of youth students, impacting the lives of people on Sunday that I get to talk to. It's just I honestly can't imagine life any differently. I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, no, that's good. I think unpack a little bit too all what you do for the church in case anybody that's listening doesn't know, because you do a lot. We could do an entire episode on all the things that Rachel does at the church, but tell us, give us the Cliff Notes version.
Yeah, I'm on the worship team. That's where I started out. I serve on production. Love that. And then I'm also on the youth team. So I lead a small group, and I actually just recently started leading worship on youth nights. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
And you're on the songwriting
I'm on the songwriting team. Yep.
And I think amidst all of that too, you get the privilege of doing life with a wide variety of different people, having a lot of different conversations and things like that. What would you say is maybe something that you pulled from your upbringing in the church that you now, okay, I'm sitting in a different seat now, you know, whereas before I was seeing other people have these conversations or go through these difficult times, but now, you know, you're able to speak into those things. How has that been maybe a strength for you? Yeah.
One of my biggest passions is like working with the middle school and now high school girls that I have in youth. And honestly, like in high school, because, you know, I was known as a pastor's kid, I really struggled with like finding my own identity and like who I was called to be. And so now, like when I see other people struggling with finding that identity, because I mean, young people they're struggling to find identity. I get to speak into that and speak into them and remind them that God defines who they are. It's not the world that defines who they are. So it's just been a really cool place to be able to step in and honestly be like, I struggled with this. I still sometimes struggle with this, right? You know, it's not like you become an adult and you don't struggle with this stuff you struggled with as a teenager, but to speak to them from a place of like being through it and starting to overcome it has been really cool.
Do you have, do you have any stories about that? I mean, you don't have to say any names or specific situations, but do you have any stories like from your time serving in youth that's been like, wow, that's like God did that?
Yeah, I actually just had a conversation with someone like a couple weeks ago, and just really got to speak into her life. And something I like to do is point out maybe like lies that people are believing, you know, like you're unloved, you're not worthy of being loved, and getting to speak into that and saying, no, like Jesus literally died for you because he loves you. He says that you're worthy. And I think just like pointing that out and seeing like them start to get it, you know, it's not always like an instant, like, okay, I get it, but being able to speak it like over multiple weeks and then they kind of start like speaking it over themselves is really, really cool.
What would you say about your own faith journey and upbringing is something that you're most excited for Simeon now?
Oh, that's a good question. So I honestly didn't really I wouldn't say that I made my faith my own until college. Not that I wasn't saved by Jesus. I was saved by Jesus at a young age, I would say. But in college, I really began to like ask questions like, well, what does it mean that like Jesus actually died for my sins? What does it mean that like God made me because he wants to like have a relationship with me? And I would say I'm just excited for Simeon to be able to do that, to be able to find maybe his own faith. Because it's not that it's not my parents' faith that I have. There may be like a couple like things that we not disagree on, but just see differently because of maybe our upbringings or things that God has maybe put on our hearts. So I'm excited to see Simeon do that, to be able to make his faith his own and to find Jesus in ways that I've never found or seen Jesus maybe, and be able to explain that and describe that to others is going to be really cool.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm excited for that whole next generation that I keep on bringing up the sprouting babies. We may not keep this in the podcast. It's becoming one of those ick words for me now. Sprouting. Bryce off the camera, struggling. Oh, let's reel it back in here. Okay. I want to really get into what is your favorite thing about your own relationship with Jesus? What is something that you feel like people may miss out on because they don't do this or they don't spend time in the Word this way? What's one of your favorite things about your relationship with Jesus?
Yeah, I would say, especially in this season, it's that I don't have to be strong because I have a Savior who's strong. So I have the ability to just be like, I can't do this on my own, but I know who can help me. And I think that's like really powerful. I think we just talked about it or maybe it was at youth, but just like surrendering in that weakness is where we find our strength in Jesus. And honestly, it's like so freeing to know that I don't have to have the answers. I don't have to carry it all. I can literally dump it on him. That's probably the wrong phrasing, but it's not. Like I can literally be like, God, I don't know what to do, but here it is. And that's like one thing, explaining that to youth kids, like sometimes they don't get it. I'm like,
it does not register.
Yeah, you don't have to carry this. Like it's not on you to fix this situation. God literally is like begging us to give it to him. And it's so freeing to be able to do that.
Do you feel like that was a gradual thing for you, or was that like a light bulb thing?
No, I feel like it was a gradual thing. But I would say especially like having Simeon, like it's been like a whole new phase of it, I think, because so much is out of my control. But definitely like a gradual thing. Cause I like to try to fix things on my own. I like to be a problem solver. I like to have the answers to stuff. But the more I learn that I can give it to him, the more like the next time I'm like, all right, but God's got it. Like, why am I stressing? God's literally got it. So
yeah, it's learning to give things to him by you have to start with one thing, just giving one thing. And then it's like, okay, I actually can rely on him for this. He is more than able. So I love that. And I think that when it comes to setting an example of serving, like you mentioned, you doing all these different things, is that something that comes from your type A, or is it something that you do like out of like, man, I mean, obviously you love the Lord, but like, what is that like? How do you reason that in your mind as far as like, okay, I'm a doer. Like I want to complete the task. I want to do the thing that's undone. Like I can finish this. Somebody needs to finish this. I'm going to do it. How do you marry that with your love for Jesus?
Yeah. Honestly, I would say probably like the places I serve are kind of where like my type A personality comes out. I used to serve in the children's ministry. Like that was the first place I served, and I still love kids, but especially like on production, I get to be a problem solver. Tech guys out there. Yeah. Production is rough. If there's a week that something doesn't go wrong, I'm happy. But like that brings me joy. And I know that I'm not just doing it to fix like XYZ problem. I'm doing it so that we can bring the word to, hundreds of people on a Sunday, so that we can have a nice quality recording for someone to watch, a sermon in a couple years. And honestly, like the same with like youth, like I get to hopefully impact, future generations. And it's nothing that I'm doing, but it's Jesus like working in and through me. So I would say like, yes, it's part of my personality, but like also Jesus made me and he made my personality. And I like, if I could spend my life just pouring it out for him, like I would. And it's just, that's who we're made to be. And I think the more like you unpack that identity, the more you realize like literally you were made to serve the King of the universe. And like the more you give your life to that, like the more joy you find and the more you want to serve and find other places to serve.
Amen to that. Yeah, that's really well said. I want to get your ultimate encouragement to somebody who's listening to this podcast, who's feeling just extremely frustrated by the fact that every time I, go to church or, I have to put on this face for somebody. I have to put on all these different hats to, be certain things for certain people. I have to answer things a certain way. I'm doing the whole, well, we're here because my dad was called here. I'm doing that whole thing. What would be your biggest encouragement to somebody who maybe feels like their faith is forced, or like it's something that they're wearing, but they're not living in their heart, I guess, or believing in their heart, or things like that? What would be your encouragement to those people?
I would say stop putting on a face. I don't know. Find a trusted person. Well, honestly, like some of the most like raw moments I've had were with like a trusted like mentor, where I like broke down and just like poured my heart out to them, and seeking wise counsel, I think, is where like I really started to begin to understand like church is a safe place. There literally are people that love you more than you can imagine, and we're not perfect people. The more time you spend at church, the more you realize nobody's perfect. You don't have to spend very long to find out that, we're all broken people, right? Serving a perfect God. So I would say like find someone that you can trust, find someone that is gonna listen to you and pray over you is a big thing. It's not just a one-time thing. It's not gonna be like you open your heart to one person and the next day, you're like fixed. I mean, maybe it is, but I doubt it. Not usually. But a person that you can continue that relationship with, whether it's, praying with someone, whether it's talking to maybe a friend you have, or yeah.
Yeah, there's such value in humility and vulnerability. We talk about those things often, and it's so important. It's so important to not feel like you have to have it all figured out or that you have it all together, because, like you said, we don't. Yeah. We're all broken people with our own individual story, and that's ultimately what I really wanted to just get into with you on the episode today, is that it's not about living out your, like you said, your father's faith or your mother's faith. It's funny that we even sing a song that has those lyrics in it. That's not what it's about. It's about the things that you choose to do because you love the Lord more than anyone or anything else. And I see you living that out. And so I'm just grateful that you got to unpack that today. Is there anything else that you want to share with everybody listening before we close out this episode?
I don't know. I don't think so.
It's been well said. A well said, well said
it's
show.
It's the Lord, not me.
It's the Lord. Yes, indeed. Well, thank you so much for listening to today's podcast. Thank you to Rachel for being here. And if you have any questions or anything at all, drop us a comment. If you're listening on YouTube, you can always send an email to hello@meadows.church and just put the subject Live Your Purpose Podcast in there for us. And that way we'll know that you're trying to reach out to us on the show. And if you have anything that stood out to you from today's episode, we appreciate you sharing that with us. Let us know how the show is impacting you, and we're just so grateful that you choose to make us part of your day. So again, like, comment, subscribe, all the good things so that this show can get out to as many people as possible. Share it with your family, with your friends. We appreciate y'all so much. Thanks for tuning in today, and we'll catch you on the next one.